Now, using a cloud compiler is very simple, and as long as your programs are working, it's very easy to just download them and away you go, as you've seen. However, for more complicated coding, sometimes what you want to do is set breakpoints, you want to debug, and let's see how we would go about that, because there's no way to do it with our cloud compiler. So we're just going to click on LEDs, and we're going to right mouse click, and we're going to down here to where it says Export Program. Now, the export target will be Freedom K64, and Kyle Microvision 4 is the default, so we're going to change that just by clicking on here and saying Kineits Design Studio, and let's say export. To export it, we have to say Save File, and then we're going to go up here and we're going to click on this. Now the next step is to extract it to the right place, because Kineits Design Studio has a special place that it looks for stuff. So we're going to say extract to, and let me just zoom in on this screen here, and we're going to extract to where Kineits Design Studio is going to expect all of its stuff. Now that's going to be under Users, your username, and under your username, which you should find down near the bottom here, is workspace.kds. We're just going to say OK. And here we are now in Kineits Design Studio. And as you can see at the top here, it says C:\users, your user ID, and workspace.kds. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to the top here. I'm going to say File, Import, and then what I'm going to do is say Existing Projects into Workspace, and I'm going to say Next, and I'm going to say Browse, and I'm going to browse Kineits.kds, and I can take a look here and I can actually see, if I slide down here a little bit, I can see the LEDs. So I can just click on that and say OK, and I can say Copy Projects into Workspace. Now notice that when I do that, it goes dull. The reason for that, it's already in the workspace. So all we have to do is just uncheck this and go down here and say Finish. And at that point, what it's going to do is bring up our code. So let's take a look. Let's take a look at rgbleds.cpp. Notice there's some other stuff here that came over with it, but we just double click here, and here's exactly the code that we had in our cloud compiler. Now what we can do is we can just say project build all. Let's just back up a little bit here, and you can see there's no problems down here. We can follow through the next part, which is basically just downloading it to the board. We're going to click on this and go to Debug Configurations, and notice there it is there. Double click LEDs, it's launching, and it's going to ask us to change perspective, which we will. And when it's finished, we can actually just run it, and what we should see is it should be blinking just the way it did before. Okay, now that it's finished, let's go up to the top here. Now that it's finished, we have a number of things that we can do. And the simplest one to do is do step over. Right now, the red LED's on. If I click here, it's going to then step over, and the red LED is now off. And if I step over this, it's going to wait 0.2 seconds, and then the red LED is going to be back on once it executes this line. And our red LED is on at this point. So, or we can just run it and see the red LED flashing again. So you can see, and let's stop it. So you can see that our program pretty much runs the same as before. If you do stop it with the red terminate button here, you're going to have to launch it again. So we're going to have to go down here to say Debug Configurations and hit LEDs again, unfortunately. So please don't hit that. You can always pause. So one of the other buttons we're going to take a look at, because doing the step over seemed to run fairly intuitively. It's just going from one step to the other. It took a while to get to these various steps. But once it launches here, we're going to use the step into just to get an idea of the hardware abstraction layer that we have here. So the first thing I'm going to do, let's go up to the top here, is I'm going to hit reset our debug. So it's going to start right at the very beginning. So if I say step into, and let me just bring this up a little bit higher so we can see it here. So notice it's jumped down and it's doing some stuff well below where we were before. It's doing integer read, return GPIO read, at GPIO. And you can see if we slide this over here, we can see a number of addresses and things changing over here. And here's our GPIO addresses. Let's see if I can just back out just a little bit so we can see these numbers. So as we go through here, we can get some very in-depth troubleshooting down into each hardware abstraction layer, right down to the physical registers. Notice these are 4004, D000. So all those registers we looked at before, we can get all this kind of detail by doing a step into. Now at any point we can do a step return to take us up a level, step return again to take us up another level, step return again, so we're down 3 levels, and here we are back at our original code. So every time we do a step over and we work at this level, it's executing a whole bunch of different levels well below where we are. And this gives you the access to troubleshooting right down to the hardware registers, which is something you definitely cannot do with Arduino unless you spend another $50 to $100 for a JTAG.